And now for something completely different. So it's Christmas time, and it's the time of the year when many of us probably have leftover bottles. In particular, you might have leftover bottles or gifted bottles of liqueurs, perhaps unwanted gifts from someone who knows that you like whiskey. So I decided to do a little video on liqueurs and talk about some of them that are better than others. So why do liqueurs exist? That would probably be a good place to start. It's one reason is because with whiskey, you're not allowed to sweeten or flavour the spirit and still call it whiskey. Unlike some other spirits like brandy and in particular rum, which has some really lax definitions depending on where you are in the world, which can actually be sweetened and even flavoured, and they can still call it rum or brandy. So the liqueurs category kind of exists because it's a convenient secondary category, a different tier of the spirits world that often contains whiskey or similar spirits, but is more open to experimentation and messing around with flavouring, sweetening and heavy dilution without tarnishing the name of the spirits that they're based on. In some parts of the world, these things that I'm calling liqueurs here in the UK, some parts of the world they're called schnapps or aquavit, but essentially today we're going to be talking about bastardized spirits that are flavoured and or sweetened and often well below 40%. In the EU, liqueurs are defined as spirit drinks containing at least 15% alcohol by volume and at least 7% sugar. Does that make liqueurs a lesser category? In my humble opinion, and this might come off as a bit snobbish, but absolutely yes. I think that with liqueurs, you never really get the same experience that you'd even get from like a low-end, bottom shelf, £15-20 bottle of cheap single malt. But what it does allow is an avenue for younger and lesser whiskey and other spirits to be used and made more enjoyable, often for an appropriately lower price, and it also provides a whiskey-esque product that's sometimes a little bit more palatable to the uninitiated. We have to remember that liqueurs are probably enjoyed by more people than people enjoy whiskey, and they're going to be many people's gateway into spirits. So we're talking about things like King's Ginger Liqueur, Drambuie, the infamous Baileys, Jägermeister, Limoncello, things like that. They quite often get people interested in proper spirits before they move on to something else. And some of these liqueurs, some of them, then they're not bad in their own right. I'm not saying it any louder than that. That's all you're getting. So I've got 3 examples here of liqueurs that I think are some of the better ones to try. So if you're looking for a gift for someone and you think they might appreciate a liqueur, I think that these are very good suggestions. Or if you're just looking for something a little bit different for yourself and you have a bit of a sweet tooth, you might want to give these a try. So very important, I am going to use a separate clean glass for all of these because being at least 7% sugar, they are lethally sweet. And you're not going to be able to rinse that out of the glass with a little bit of water. And word to the wise, if you're ever on a whiskey tasting tour or whiskey experience and they offer you a liqueur, ask them if you can have it at the end, because a lot of sugary and cream liqueurs as well, they really stick to your palate and they can ruin everything that you taste for the next quarter of an hour at least. So this will absolutely be the end of my critical whiskey tasting for the day. So let's get started then. Got my Christmas jumper. All I need is a Christmas drink. There we go. So first on the menu, go for this one here. Something else I don't like about these liqueurs is that quite often they can leave your mouth feeling absolutely grim. the sugar content on these, it's something that I really don't like. It just leaves you instantly feeling like you need to brush your teeth. I don't have a massively sweet tooth, so it's a bit of a shock to me. It's very different to what I would normally drink, and probably you as well. But it's important to be open-minded and try something new occasionally and have a little bit of fun. Why not? So this first one, I'm going to keep it down there. I don't think I've shown it to you yet. Oh. So this is our first liqueur. It's not Guinness, honest. Any guesses to what you think that is? Some people might guess it, but I think what this is based on, even the colour of that looks very, very dark. Darker than I would expect it to. And I'm not sure why that is. But this stuff is, I'll show you the label. It's another English whiskey company, or the Norfolk product. So the Norfolk it's the Norfolk distillery, but they use the Norfolk branding for their grain whiskies and also their range of liqueurs. This kind of is and kind of isn't as a liqueur, because this stuff, they've been selling it for a while. I think it used to be called Nelstrips. Nelstrip is the family that owns the Norfolk English Whiskey Distillery. It used to come in a tall, dark glass bottle, but this is a mixed spirit drink, if you read from the label. And it's got their seal in the hat design, which I really like, that they put on their grain whiskies. And the reason why that this is called a mixed spirit drink is they actually get PX fortified wine that they buy in so they can use the PX casks to mature their whiskey. And when they buy those casks, they ask if they can have the PX as well. They buy the whole thing together. And they actually mix that PX sherry, so that heavily sweetened sherry, with some of their 3-year-old whiskey. We also know that the PX that comes out of those casks that they make this with is said to be a 15-year-old PX sherry. And we know that after it's married together with that English whiskey spirit, it's married in oak for a further 2 years. So really you could call this an incredibly intensely PX finished whiskey, although I think that's pushing the law a little bit. Or you could look at it as a fortified wine. I like this stuff though, even though it's not strictly a liqueur, because I don't think that they add any additional sugar into this apart from what's already in the PX. So I'm not sure that it technically qualifies as a liqueur, which is probably why they call it a mixed spirit drink. But I think that it's a liqueur-esque kind of thing, and it tends to be a bit better than the other options on the market. That colour though, incredibly dark. So I'll give you some brief tasting notes on this one. So on the nose, very, very sugary. Really, really strong notes of sugary sweet raisins. A little hint of nuttiness, peanut, and I think some of that nutty, grainy note might be coming through from the English whiskey spirit. You really do get this impression that kind of the English whiskey, 3-year-old whiskey, is kind of hiding behind all of that jammy, raisiny, sort of figs and prunes, raisiny sweet grape note. I must admit that it's not the best PX that I've ever had, and even though it's not a PX, I would probably rate this in my top 10 PXs that I've ever had. It's, if you like that style of incredibly sweet sherry, you will like this. You can definitely feel and taste the presence of that English Whiskey Company spirit. On the palate, getting more sugary raisins, prunes. There's obviously a lot of sugar in this. You can feel it on your tongue and your teeth. It's very viscous. I got a little bit on my hand when I wiped off the bottle and my hand's still sticky. So possibly they do add extra sugar to this. I'm not too sure. It doesn't say that they do, but it kind of feels like they have. But Whether they have added extra sugar to this or not, I think that the presence of that English Whisky Company spirit really balances it out nicely, and it adds a nice little bit of extra clarity to what otherwise might be a little bit oversweet and cloying. As for the finish, I think it's got a little bit more body than the average PX, because this stuff is 20% ABV, getting lots of sugary grape and prune juice on the finish. Very, very sugary, sticky, but you get a nice warming effect from the whiskey on the late palate and the finish on this one. So yeah, I think if you like your incredibly sweet PX and you're looking for a liqueur, this is a good one. So moving on, let's have a look at our second pour. And this one's going to be instantly recognisable. You're going to know what this one is. But it's not what you think it is. It's better. Christmas in a glass. Everyone has a bit of Baileys at Christmas, don't they? But it's not Baileys. It's another English Whisky Company product. I'm not sponsored by them in any way. They don't even know who I am, in all likelihood. But this is the Norfolk Nog. So this one comes in at something ABV, I can't see it, 19%. So I think that's a little bit stronger than Bailey's, your typical cream liqueur. You can probably see that, well, you can see the seal in the hat again on there. It's in really nice blue glass, and you can probably see some condensation on there, because I don't believe in adding ice to any of my drinks, even a liqueur, because it just makes them watery and horrible. So I've had this one in the fridge. Both of these come in 500ml bottles, by the way. They're not full 700s, but you probably don't want a full 700ml of a liqueur, do you? But this stuff, it's probably a fitting description to say that it's like Bailey's on steroids. But much better. Starting with the quite curious name, Nog is a very old drink, and it's a drink that has its roots in Norfolk, and it shares its origins with the Dutch Advocaat. Nog was originally a strong dark ale made in East Anglia, and at some point people started adding milk and eggs and spices and things like that, and it evolved into the things that we now call Advocaat, or in America probably most commonly known as eggnog. These days a lot of people are probably going to be most familiar with things like Bailey's, which as a cream liqueur it's not too far at all from this modern Nog. Bailey's though, as it's obviously the direct competitor for this stuff. Bailey's is made from cream, a small amount of 3-year-old Irish whiskey, and bulked out to 17% ABV with unaged neutral spirit, whereas the only thing that goes into the Norfolk Nog is pure undiluted 3-year-old English whiskey. If you like your cream liqueurs but you're looking for something a little bit better, then I'd also really recommend having a look at the Isle of Arran Gold. It's a very similar thing. I'd rank it pretty much on par with this English Whisky Company version. But the Isle of Arran one, I'm not sure if it's still the case, but they used to say that it was made with their 10-year-old single malt. So this stuff, Norfolk Nog, on the nose, sweet, creamy, caramel, sort of caramac, that sort of caramel white chocolate, toffee, creamy, lactic, sweet. Caramel, toffee pennies, milky, creamy. You're not going to get a huge amount of tasting notes out of liqueurs, but that's what I'm getting. And I think that that's a really nice little change of pace, Christmassy drink that probably most people will appreciate, whether they are into their spirits or not. So moving on to our third liqueur is this stuff. And I think I tried this stuff because my dad bought a bottle and I tried it, and I didn't expect a lot at all because it's a liqueur and but it surprised me. It's better than you would expect. So Kraken is, I don't know if we have this all over the world, but here in the UK it's pretty prominent. Kraken is a spiced rum kind of liqueur. The standard Kraken, actually no, this stuff, they just call it black spiced rum, which is exactly the problem that I was talking about before, that because with rum, most countries don't have any clearly defined law on what you can add to rum, so a lot of rum is produced with added sugar and flavouring, spices and whatever the hell they want. So this stuff isn't actually labelled as a liqueur, even though it is between you and me. They just call it a black spiced rum. But it comes in at a very respectable ABV of 40%. And reading from the label, it's basically Kraken spiced rum, but with added coffee. They say roast coffee, a rich fusion of spiced Caribbean rum, we don't know where in the Caribbean, and fine Arabica bean coffee. Again, it does annoy me a little bit when they say Arabica bean coffee, because almost all coffee is Arabica. Although I suppose something like this, if they really wanted to be cheap, they could go for some horrible old Robusta, but they haven't, so yeah, fair enough. They recommend putting this in an espresso rumtini, which is not something that I've done, but I can imagine it would probably work well. So let's have a little bit of this then. Screw top. It's probably about the same colour as the PX, i.e. black. Show you the label again. Nice label. There's a lot of design gone into this. The people who did that label could work for Diageo. You could get those mixed up, couldn't you? But not once you smell them. When you smell this, it's all about the coffee. It just smells like, it's not overly dark or roasted. It's not like a horrible Starbucks coffee that's been roasted to within an inch of its life. It's just sweet, dark coffee. So, dark roast coffee, you can tell that there's alcohol in there, an alcoholic base. Sweet, vanilla, a little bit woody. Not overly complex, but very well balanced. Good intensity, because this stuff comes in at 40% ABV, so it's the same strength as a lot of standard whiskies. The problem with a lot of these liqueurs is that they drop it down to 20% or below, and it's like a syrup rather than a drink. Really good coffee notes though. I really like my coffee. I drink black coffee most days, and I'm seeing a lot of notes from that in this. Have to say that it's not got the complexity of a fine black coffee. It's not got those top notes. It's not got the acidity or the spices or the woody notes that you get from really good coffee. But I think that it does have decent flavours. It's got a good flavour profile, and it's got a really strong dose of coffee for any of you that like that. And I think this is a really good liqueur for anyone that's in the market for something like that, especially if, like me, you really like your coffees. And I'm not sure about that espresso rumtini that they mentioned on the label, but I can say that this stuff makes a really good alcoholic mocha if you add a little bit of this into a hot chocolate. You guys know what I'm thinking now though. I've got 3 glasses of this stuff on the table in front of me, and as always, you can never forget home blending. Never let your inner blender rest. So what should we try here? I've got a bit of the cream liqueur left, and this is the coffee liqueur. That looks hideous. I think that smoothed the rum liqueur out a bit and added a little bit more interest to the cream liqueur. But what if we got really crazy? I can hear people unsubscribing as I do this. Don't worry, I'm only going to put a tiny bit in. That'll do. That's as much as I'm going to waste on that. But you've got to try it, haven't you? You've got to keep an open mind. You've got to experiment a little bit. And you've got to have a little bit of fun. So that is probably like 3 parts Kraken rum coffee liqueur and 2 parts Kilhoman cask strength. That smokiness is cutting through straight away. That dirty peatiness does not give a damn about what's in that rum liqueur, cutting straight through. I'm not going to say that this is going to replace whiskey for me, but it's a fun experiment. So over to you. What liqueurs have you found that surprised you, or do you just hate them all? Because to be honest, that's a valid opinion. This isn't the kind of thing that I have regularly. But what have you found that you like, and what do you do with them? What do you put them in? I'm sure there's going to be some weird and wonderful suggestions there, and I look forward to hearing what concoctions you've come up with. As for me, I'm off to brush my teeth now. But I hope you've had a little bit of fun with this one with me, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.